Hello students and welcome to this IB Business Management exam skills video. And in this video, we're going to be talking about assessment objectives and command terms. One of the most important things to learn as part of your IB journey, and you're going to see these all across your IB subjects. So firstly, what are assessment objectives? Well, as I mentioned, understanding assessment objectives will improve your exam skills massively. So it's really important to know what you're doing. So for the business management course, there are 4 assessment objectives. So for example, if we take the syllabus from chapter 1.2, types of business entities, probably one of the first chapters that most students study. And what I've done is I've just taken this from the IB syllabus, and you can see distinction between the private and public sectors is an AO2. The main features of the following types of organizations, AO3. So today we're going to be going through what exactly these mean. So just before I do that, these AO, whatever they are, show the level of understanding expected by students. They show the depth of answers required in the exam, and they also show you what skills you need to use. So the reason these are very important is I'm sure you've been in a test or an exam in the past, and you get a question and you wonder to yourself, how much do I need to write for this? Or maybe you've done a test or exam and you've written a certain amount, and then the person marking your paper says, well, you need to say more. Or maybe you wrote far too much and wasted time that you could have used on other questions. So that's where these AOs help out. And just to emphasize, AOs means assessment objective. So AO2 is assessment objective 2. So to summarize what these means, I'm going to talk about these in a bit more depth. AO1 means knowledge. So this is understanding the syllabus, understanding the textbook, and these are normally worth 2 marks. AO2s in business means that you learn the knowledge and you apply it to the case study. So you'll be given information, you'll be given a few paragraphs about a business, and you've got to apply that knowledge to the case study. AO3 is when you have to make a decision. And then AO4 are the skills. So these are, I call them maths and diagrams. Now, just to emphasize, AO1 means it can be tested at a maximum of AO1 level. AO2 means a maximum of AO2. So that could mean it could be, they could ask you an AO1 question or an AO2 question. AO3 means it can be either AO1, 2, or 3. This might be a bit confusing at the moment, but the more you practice, you'll get it, don't worry. AO4 is on its own, so it's not related to the other assessment objectives. So just to go through the command terms. So for AO1, if you remember, this was knowledge. Every time you see an AO1 question, then it will begin with one of these 6. These are called command terms. These are words which kind of tell you what to do in the question. Define, describe, outline, state, list, identify. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but one of the most common ones you'll see is define, where you have to give the meaning of a word. AO2, there are 7 command terms, analyze, apply, etc. A common one I see and I use is explain, which is to give a detailed account. So here it says detailed. So you need to give more detail than with an AO1 answer. And you do that by linking it to the case study and just giving a bit more depth in your answer. The AO3s are when you have to make a decision, and there are 9 command terms. The one I see a lot is evaluate. So this is make an appraisal. So making an appraisal, I've just summarized as when you have to make a decision. So you give pros, you give cons, and then you come to a decision. I've got some examples coming up. And then the maths and diagrams, AO4, there are 9 of these. And these are things like calculate. For drawing, maybe you construct, maybe you draw, maybe you label, or you plot something. So again, these are your skills related to maths and diagrams. So to give you some examples, let's use the syllabus I just showed you, the types of business entities, sole traders, partnerships, etc. So if it were an AO1 question, it'd be worth 2 marks. So maybe they might ask you to define a sole trader, and maybe you give 3 sentences to define it. Or you can state 2 characteristics of a privately held company. So you can see here, it's just knowledge. If you memorize or you learn a textbook, then you should be able to do these fairly well. AO2 takes it up a level. So explain 2 advantages for J Palace to go public. So to go public, as I'm sure you've learned, is to go from a privately held to a publicly held company. And this question is asking for 2 advantages. Now here, you need to know the advantages. So you need to know the textbook, you need to know the syllabus, which is an AO1, but you're going to need to apply it to this company called J Palace. Distinguish between J Palace's use of horizontal and vertical integration. Again, the knowledge, you need to know what horizontal and vertical integration are. But with AO2, you need to link it to J Palace. Now, you might be wondering what J Palace is, but this is a case study I use with my students. It's a one page of A4. You get one page of information related to J Palace, and then you use parts of the case study to help you answer that question. I will have videos about all of AO1, 2, 3, and 4 coming up. There'll be one video for AO1, one video for AO2. There'll be multiple videos for AO3 because AO3 is the hardest to learn. So what is AO3? So AO3 is when you have to make a decision. So for example, evaluate whether J Palace should go public. Now compare this to this one. Explain 2 advantages to go public. Evaluate going public. So what evaluate would mean is make a decision. Do you think that J Palace should go public? Now, as part of the decision, you will have to consider the advantages of going public and the disadvantages of going public. And that's kind of what you've done in up here. But you've only here in the AO2, you've only looked at the advantages of going public. So evaluate means look at the pros, look at the advantages, look at the disadvantages, and then come to a conclusion. And that conclusion is also really important. So you might conclude that they should go public, but then you would need to justify why they're doing that. Similarly, recommend. So recommend means come to a decision. Whether J Palace should use horizontal or vertical integration as a method of growth. So again, you'd look at horizontal, you'd look at the pros and cons, you'd look at vertical, what are the pros and cons, and then you come to a conclusion about which one of those is better, and then you would justify your answer. AO4, maybe you would construct a break-even diagram for J Palace. Now you may or may not have done break-even diagrams, but that's one of the AO4 diagrams in the syllabus. And then in finance, maybe calculate the gross profit margin in 2022 for J Palace. And beneath my head, it says 4 marks. So this is in terms of the syllabus. What I've also done is looked at the AO1 to AO4 in terms of an everyday situation, just to give you another example of what the difference is between all of them are. So let's say, for example, I am thinking about cycling to work. For info, in the past, I have cycled to work, but the last couple of years, 2 years ago, me and my wife had a child, and I've been very, very lazy, or rather pushed for time since, and I'm getting unfit. So I'm thinking about whether I should cycle to work more. So how could we answer this using AO1 to AO4? So the first thing we do is we'd look at what the knowledge are. So define the term bicycle. Now I know what a bicycle is, by the way, but that's the sort of thing we might do. Define the term bicycle. Maybe we might define cycling or something like that. Maybe a bit more applicable, something what I might actually do is, well, let's look at 2 different routes. State 2 different routes that Mr. Johnson could take from home to school. Moving on to the AO2s, we link to the case study. Now, the case study here is me. I am the case study. We're looking at me, my situation. And so the first question might be explain 2 advantages for Mr. Johnson to cycle to work. So one could be fitness. Since I had my child, I haven't done very much exercise. I put on a bit of weight. And cycling to work would be a really good way for me to exercise and to get fit and to be good for my health. So the knowledge there is cycling is good for somebody's health. The link would be that in the last 2 years, I haven't done very much. I put on a bit of weight, and it would therefore be good for me to cycle. The AO3 would be to make a decision. So you might say, evaluate whether Mr. Johnson to cycle to work. So here you might look at some advantages. So the health, you might look at the that I don't have to spend as much money on petrol, for example. You then might look at the disadvantages. So maybe it takes a lot of time out of my life. Obviously, cycling is going to take longer than driving the car. So that means I have less time for my family or whatever like that. And then AO4 might be, this was difficult to write, by the way, draw a fully labeled diagram showing Mr. Johnson's route to work. You're never going to get that in the business exam, by the way. But just in terms of this example about my life, that's a skill where you maybe have to draw a diagram. Also, remember AO4 is mathematics. So calculate the average distance traveled by work by bicycle per month if Mr. Johnson cycles every Tuesday to work. So you then need to go and do some sort of calculation. So hopefully that gives you a bit more clarity about what AO1 to 4 are. Like I said, there will be videos for each of these individually, and there'll be multiple videos for AO3 because, as you can see, AO3 is worth the most. You're going to write the most. So the skills of doing AO3, it's going to be more than one video. So just to summarize assessment objectives, there's AO1, 2, 3, and 4. These all require different skills such as maths, diagrams, linking to case studies, definitions. They tell you how much to write in the exam. This is really useful. You know that if you get an AO3 question, you need to write quite a lot. If you have an AO1 question worth 2 marks, you only need to write 2-3 sentences. And if you write a whole page, then you're wasting time. So it really, really helps by telling you how much to write. And like I said, it lets you know what the question is demanding of you. And that's a really, really important exam skill. Okay, that's it for now. See you in the next video.